Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Scheer Madness. And it is 2023 coming at you live on January 2nd. And I don't know about you guys, but I got some big goals here for 2023. And this last year has been a year just full of blessings. And I sat here on New Year's Eve and just looking back at everything that God has blessed me with in my life, all of the abundance and the prosperity, and feeling so grateful because honestly, like 5 years ago, I was not where I am now today. I was, financially broke, living paycheck to paycheck, working as a nutritionist, making very, very minimal, not really feeling like I had the mission and the purpose like I do now today. I was relationship broke. I actually had just walked away from a 5.5 year relationship where I was engaged. Physically, mentally, I was struggling. I was dealing with all of my gut issues. I was diving into doing some of my own healing work, struggling a lot with depression, anxiety, and it was rock bottom for me in a lot of ways. But it was actually one of the best things that could have ever happened to me because I wouldn't be who I am now today, and I wouldn't have been able to step into my God-given potential if it wasn't for everything that I had walked through. So sitting here on January 2nd, as I was looking back on New Year's Eve, I had to really take a moment and, really give all of it to God, for all of the abundance in my life. Also, abundance isn't financial wealth. Let me be clear about that. Abundance is relationships, financial groundedness. It is also financial freedom, but it is time management. And it's in those key areas where I feel like we get to step into the version of ourselves that God has called us to really be. So I'm so grateful to be where I'm at here today. But for anybody who's listening and, isn't where you know that you're capable of really stepping into, trust me, I get it. I probably get it more than anybody could ever get it. And as you step into 2023 here, if we don't change ourselves, if you don't change yourself, nothing else will change. A lot of people get to the point where they believe that, it must change. What I'm doing, my health, my mental health, my relationship, my job, it's not working. But it's not enough just to get to a point where we believe that it's not working. We also have to believe that what we're doing and how we're operating is not working. It can't just be, it must change. It has to be, I must change. And on top of it, we have to have the belief and the faith that it and I can change. So I want to share with you guys a talk that I gave for my gut health repair program about creating true and lasting change, because I love creating New Year resolutions. I love setting goals. Like I said, I got some big goals set here for 2023, but the greatest thing you can ever do is the work that you do on yourself. And that is how true and lasting change occurs. So you guys, I hope you enjoy this talk that I gave at my gut health repair program and you get a lot out of it. So here you go. All right, guys, welcome to our second gut health repair program coaching call. So you guys all have by now watched the first teaching video all about the importance of gut health. We went over, why it is so important to heal our gut, but also how we need to optimize our skeletal muscle mass. We are all after getting to the place of optimal health. And there's really those two things that are going to be key: healed and optimized gut microbiome, and on top of it,
optimized skeletal muscle mass. And we do that through the foods that we're putting into our body, but also through exercise as well, which is why throughout this entire program, you guys also get a 3-month workout program, because lifting weights is super important for your body composition, your metabolism, optimal health, and of course, longevity as well. We touched on why gut health is important, what causes the gut to become off in the first place. We talked about, medications, food triggers, food toxins, stress, all of those things can play a role. And then we dove into what the 3R approach is going to look like, because healing the gut is not just pulling out some different foods and saying, oh, we've healed the gut, right? We need to remove those triggers. We need to replace the food that caused the gut to be off in the first place with good, healthy food that's going to help promote a good, robust microbiome. And what I mean by robust microbiome is lots of good bacteria throughout our entire gastrointestinal tract, because we know the more diverse our microbiome is, the greater that is associated with longevity and optimal health. So we got to remove the triggers. We got to replace them with good, gut healthy foods that help build up a good microbiome. And we even pulled out a bit of food triggers like FODMAPs too. Now, I'm going to touch on this again, but FODMAPs aren't necessarily bad for the gut. However, they are oftentimes a trigger when you have some dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is just that fancy word for an imbalance of the good and the bad bacteria. And FODMAPs are the bacteria's favorite food source. So when we have dysbiosis, we pull them out just for a short period of time, along with all of those other gut triggers, and add in a lot of the other gut healing foods. So that's really what we're focused on this first month: remove and replace. And then over the next couple of months, we're going to be diving into a protocol to eradicate some of this bacteria. Because although we can make a ton of changes just by nutrition alone, sometimes we can add in some key targeted supplements to actually target some of the bacteria overgrowth to help get rid of some of that bacteria. And then we're going to re-inoculate the gut with good bacteria. So we want to add in some more good guys, since we try to get rid of some of the bad guys that have kind of overcome our gut microbiome. And we want to work on repairing our gut lining, because sometimes when we've had a diet that's not so great, stress, our gut can become inflamed, and we can actually develop something called intestinal permeability, which is when that gut lining begins to break down and become weakened. And this is when we get food, bacteria, toxins leaking into the bloodstream, triggering an immune and inflammatory response. And over time, this is actually what leads to, immune conditions. It can lead to different kind of autoimmune conditions. It can lead to allergies. It can lead to food sensitivities. So this is why healing the gut is really so essential for overall health. So you're just on part 1 right now: remove, replace. But don't worry, we're going to be stepping into here over the next couple of months: eradicate, repair, and then into re-inoculate and reintroduce. And this is focused on the healing, and with the goal of getting into gut health and building up that healthy, robust gut microbiome. So today, I really want to dive into more so talking a little bit about change and lifestyle habits here, because you guys have a lot of the tools from the last call, diving into the foods that we need to remove, what you need to add in. We talked even a little bit about meal timing there too. So we want to give the gut some time for that to really do its job and to accomplish what we want it to accomplish. And for most people, we want to have that in place for at least 30 days. So that's why we're doing this for an entire month long before we transition into the next phase, because our body does need to adjust, get adapted, and also making change is hard, right? Like, it is hard to make changes. And this isn't a protocol where we're like, okay, we're just going to cut out a couple of things here and we're going to focus on eating healthy. This is a gut healing protocol. I get it. This isn't something that is necessarily easy. Now, it doesn't have to be hard, but it's not the average, just, eat less, work out more type approach. But people who follow this plan, they do get incredible gut healing results. And I won't say it's perfect for everybody because everybody's gut is completely unique. But it does play a massive, massive role in really getting the gut to a much better place. And that's really what I'm after here. Is I'm really after getting you guys the best results through this entire program. So if we go back to what we talked about on our very, very first coaching call, your guys' number one role is to play full out. Playing full out, showing up on all of these coaching calls, taking notes, asking questions as questions come up. We're not saying, again, you have to be perfect throughout this entire program, but giving it your best, showing up, because that's what's going to allow you to get the best results throughout this entire program. So playing full out, always, every single time, because it's easy at the beginning, right? It's easy at the beginning when, motivation is high. Oh my gosh, I'm starting this program. And I will say for most people, we start out with this, what I call uninformed optimism. Uninformed optimism is where everybody starts out, and I actually have a beautiful chart that I'm going to add in, but it goes uninformed optimism to typically informed pessimism. Now that we got all the information, we go into informed pessimism of like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. I don't know if I can do this. And then what comes after that is typically what we call the valley of despair. The valley of despair is like this point where we're like, oh my gosh, I think I might quit. This is too much. I don't know if I can do it. And that's normal for that to come up. But it's at that point where we get to really make a decision. We get to make a decision to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to quit. I'm going to have to start over and stay on this whole circle that I've been on, or I should say the cycle of getting to this point, saying it's too hard and I'm right back to where I was before. Or we get to make the decision to push through a little bit. And usually it's at that point when we get past, which is usually after 30 days as well, we get into informed optimism, because we start to build confidence in ourselves. You're like, you know what? This was hard at the beginning, but it's not that hard anymore. You know what? Like, I actually don't even miss any of those foods that I pulled out. I'm starting to feel better. I have better energy. You know what? I got some good systems down now. I know what I'm eating for breakfast, for lunch and dinner. I'm starting to enjoy my meals. Like, you know what? I can do this. I can do this, for a while. And you know what? I think I even want to do it for a lot longer. And that's the place where you guys are going to get to, after you kind of push through, we get into that informed optimism. And then we go to success, and success is where we're like, I did it. I went through all of this. And we get to step into that place of having so much pride in doing the work, because I've been there before. I've been there with all of my own gut issues, frustrated, fearful of like, okay, this is just another thing that's not going to work. This is too restrictive. All of the stories that come up along the way. Trust me, been there. I get it. 100%. So just know that whole process, it's kind of like this little downward kind of going up, is very normal. It's normal anytime we decide to create change in our life. But anytime you are up leveling in your life, which you could say up leveling is healing, up leveling is growth, it's massively uncomfortable, and it requires us to do things that we haven't done before. And it's when we really step away from resistance and into allowing and just leaning into that. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Oh my gosh, like it's hard, but you know what? I'm going to do it. That things start to click, and we start to see the results ultimately. So let's talk a little bit about, how does change actually occur? Do you think change occurs in an instant or over time? Alyssa?
I was just going to say, I think it's a journey. Like, I don't think it's something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that like you have to put like the work in every single day to see the change. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah. So something that's a journey. Anyone else have any definitions of how they feel like change occurs?
I was consistency.
Through consistency?
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like it's in an instant, or do you feel like it's over time?
Or I guess maybe a commitment, maybe a better word, but over time, definitely. I feel like lasting change takes a longer time to develop.
Awesome. Awesome. So these are all awesome answers, and all of your answers make total sense. But believe it or not, change actually happens in an instant. It happens in an instant. And I know that's kind of mind blowing a little bit. We contemplate change for a really long time. Our role in change, what we actually have control over, believe it or not, it happens in an instant. And change actually occurs when the pain of our current circumstances becomes greater than the pain of the actual change. So I'm going to say that again. When the pain of our current circumstances becomes greater than the pain of the actual change, because sometimes like we do find pain in the change, right? This is when we're like, I got to give up these foods. Oh my gosh, I got to start working out and get to the gym and I'm sore. And we see the pain of change. Sometimes it's missing out, right? We get a little bit FOMO. I'm missing out on social events and good foods at parties. And we view that as pain. But until the pain of where we're at becomes greater, this is usually where we stay stuck. Now, how many of you guys have ever seen somebody in their life who is really trying to get healthy for a long time? You know, they would try to eat healthy, they would go to the gym, they would work out, and then they'd kind of fall off. But then all of a sudden, they were given maybe a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, or they were given a diagnosis of heart disease, or even cancer. And then all of a sudden, guess what happened? They started to be able to make those changes pretty consistently. So what actually happened there? The pain of the current circumstance became greater than the pain of having to create the change. Now, it doesn't have to be something like that. It definitely does not. It doesn't have to be like we get a cancer diagnosis, or anything like that. For some people, it does. But really, what it requires is this is more important than the pain of the change there ultimately. And I know for myself, like my gut issues were at the point where I was willing to do whatever because I was so massively unhappy, unconfident in my body. I felt like I was a prisoner in my body. I had no energy, depression, anxiety. You know, you guys heard it all on the very first call that we did. You know, I had all of that stuff. So my pain was so great. I was willing to do whatever that I had to do in order to create the change that I needed in my life. And that's the kind of mentality that we want to be able to develop. And essentially what actually happens there is it's becoming a must instead of a should. It must change. It must change instead of it should change. You see the difference there? Must change versus should change. And I'll share with you another example of why this actually happens in an instant. Again, our role in creating change, not physical change there in the body. But have you ever been in a relationship that was like not the healthiest relationship? Maybe it was like a toxic relationship, or you just knew it wasn't the right relationship, but you kind of like stuck it out for a while. You're like, I'm going to kind of stick this out because it wasn't like bad enough. You're like, okay, I'm not really happy, but you know what? I'm going to kind of stay in this. And then all of a sudden you got to that moment in time where you were like, that's it. I've had it. I've had enough. I'm out of here. We've all been there before, right?
95% of your body's serotonin is produced by the bacteria that resides in your gut. And this explains why when my gut was a wreck, or when clients come to work with me at Rachel Scheer Nutrition, they don't just suffer from things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, but they also have symptoms of anxiety, depression, and brain fog, because our gut and our brain are highly interconnected. And as Hippocrates says, all disease begins and ends in the gut. And this is the exact reason why I am so passionate about taking a functional, root cause based approach for any chronic health condition, gut issues, mental health illness, autoimmune conditions, stubborn weight loss, you name it. Me and my team do a comprehensive analysis looking at all these different systems so we can test instead of just guess, and then develop a customized nutrition plan and protocol to address these root causes and balances in the body and restore function. If you want to book a free 30-minute call with anyone from my team, click the link in the show notes or visit rachelscheer.com.
So we contemplate change for a really long time. We have a level of, I'm not happy, that there is pain here, but it requires us getting to the point where that pain becomes to a certain point where we're like, I've had it, I'm done, I'm out of here. And that change, that mindset shift happens in an instant where we say, I'm good, I'm done. And then it becomes easy at that point. So sometimes it is getting to that point, and essentially it's getting to that point where we make it a must, essentially. And very often the only reason we don't create change is because we think change equals pain, right? We're like, this change is painful. So that's where we stay in this circumstance because we're like, that's painful, right? How many of you guys have ever been like, although I'm not happy here, and I want to have change, but if I go through this entire approach, if I go through all of this, and if I don't get the change, then I'm going to be even more disappointed. I'm going to feel even worse. So you know what? I'm not going to set myself up for that disappointment. So I'm just going to stay right here. Right? Like we view that pain, we like anticipate that pain to be so high that again, we inhibit our healing. How do we make this an absolute must? Because one of the beliefs we have to step into is one, it must change. And all of you guys are on this call because you have that belief. You have the belief that it must change. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. You're like, something's got to change, whether it's with my nutrition, whether it's with some protocols that I'm doing for my gut, whether it's my stress, it must change. And that's the very first step. We have to get to that place of it must change. And then number two, the second belief that we have to carry is I must change, right? I must change, meaning I am responsible for this change. Now, you may work with a coach, you may work with a practitioner and somebody who's going to help guide you to that change, but ultimately they can give you all the information in the world, right? But who's doing the work at the end of the day? And who's creating the change in their own life, right? So not only is it must change, it is I must change. And that's that ownership part. That's taking massive, massive ownership. I must change. I'm the source. I'm responsible. And then once we have those two, we have it must change, I must change. The third piece we have to have is it can change. Because if you don't believe that it can, even if you believe that it must change, that I must change, that I'm responsible, but if you don't believe that it can change, then you won't put the effort in order to get the results, right? So that's really the third piece to the equation. It must change, I must change, and I believe that it and I can change. And once we have all three of those, right? Once we have all three of those, that's when we step into that place where we're really in that place of power and we're able to create the change that we want. So a lot of this journey too is really stepping into a place where we control the things that we have control over. And then we also surrender to some of the things that we don't have control over. And as you go throughout this course, you guys will see me get massively tactical. You will see me talk all about the foods that are triggers for your gut and different protocols and the supplements to take. And we'll talk about fasting. And on this next call, we're going to dive into macros and hitting your protein and calories. But you'll also hear me talk a lot about this too. Because again, we can have all the information in the world. We can have all the plans, the protocols, we can have all of that. But if we don't believe we can change and we don't own our own role in that change, then we're not going to be able to get the results. And what I see oftentimes is when we don't have number 2, it then goes into the place of, right? How many of you guys have seen it's everybody else's fault, right? But mine, it's the program, it's everybody else. It's not my fault. And then, this is where, again, we get into that cycle and that loop. So knowing that is, again, for you guys who are listening, you're like, oh, thinking of things previously in the past, maybe that have popped up or where maybe change has been hard. One, massive awareness is what is so powerful for creating the change in the life you want, because that's, again, why you guys are all here. It's not just about the gut. Yeah, we all want to have a healthy gut, but part of the homework that we talked about last time was getting massively clear on what your definition of health is. And you want to have health to create a life that you want for yourself. You want to feel a certain way every single day. You want to have the energy to do certain things to fulfill your life's purpose. That's why we're on this journey. That's that massive, powerful why. So we'll talk a little bit about extending that homework, but it's not just about the gut, because if it's just about, I want to have good gut bacteria, right? That's not enough. And it's the same thing with weight loss too, right? If it's just about the weight, like that's not enough, because when the going gets hard, we'll quit. If it's just about the weight, if it's just about the weight, we will quit. But if it's about something greater, if it's about, I am doing this because this is me stepping into a version of myself that can show up and live my life's mission, to carry that out, which is whether that's through your career, whether that's through your family, whether that's through your children. If it's because of that, you'll stick it out when the going gets hard. But if it's just about the weight, if it's just about, I want to get rid of these gut issues, it's often not enough. It has to be the greater picture of why we're trying to get healthy, because of a certain life that we're trying to create for ourselves. So if you guys want to go back to your homework a bit there of my definition of health is, what I recommend doing is tying that to your life. Tying that to your life. My definition of health is feeling my very best every single day, having the freedom to do the things I want to do, to travel, to have the energy to carry out my life's passion, to have longevity, to wake up in the morning and have energy, right off the bat, to not have to rely on 6-7 cups of coffee, to not have to think and worry about gut issues or anything like that. So I can focus on everybody else around me and the mission that I'm on. That's my definition of health. And each of you guys are going to have your own definition. So as much as we can tie this definition to our own individual mission, the more successful we're going to be. And that's where success during this looks like what? And it's always tied to the feeling. For me, when I went through this, and I had to heal my gut, for me, success was getting to a point where, one, I wasn't thinking about my gut, but two, where I just would wake up and I had energy in the day. I woke up and I felt good about myself when I was looking in the mirror. I had confidence. And what was even more interesting? A lot of that actually came from me showing up for myself, me doing the work even when it was hard, because a lot of that confidence actually came from there. Even when that little guy in my head came up of like, I don't feel like it, I don't want to. Instead, what came up is, we're going to act in spite of thoughts, feelings, moods, and emotions, kind of being that like loving parent for ourselves and doing it. And over time, like brick by brick by brick, I had more confidence in myself, and what I was doing was creating the results. So I had more energy, I had more confidence, and I was getting results. And that's how it's built, brick by brick by brick. And it actually oftentimes comes partially from doing the work. Yes, the protocol, specifically working the body, but also the way we feel about ourselves oftentimes comes from that second part. So tying it to the feeling. How do you want to feel every single day? That's that success piece of really what we're chasing after. If I don't achieve this health, if I don't achieve, feeling this way, this means X, Y, and Z for me. And that's that pain piece right there. If I don't achieve this means this for my life. This is that pain piece. And this is the part that we want to get very clear. Like it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal to not feel good every single day. Like we brush it off and we're like, you know what? I don't have energy. That like, we have to ask the question, like, what is it costing you? Right? Like, what is it really actually costing you? What is it costing you with your friends, your family? What is it costing you with how you feel about yourself? What is it costing you in your career? So by not achieving this, really, what is it costing you? That's where I want you guys to go back to those questions. My definition of health is number 1, 2, success during the gut health repair program looks like it's tied to the feeling. Number 3, if I don't achieve this, this means blank for me in my life. So let's get massively clear on that. Let's go back and relook at that again. And then let's talk a little bit about now the things that you do have control over on this journey. Number 1 is what you focus on. And anytime we're creating change, what I'm about to cover here next, there are really 3 big things that will dictate a decision in any circumstance. Not only the decision for action throughout this gut health repair program, it'll dictate your decision of whether you decide to go to the gym. It'll dictate your impulsive buys of things you want to shop for. Anytime we make a decision, there are 3 things that really come into play in every single moment. The first one I already said, it's what we focus on, because what we focus on grows. And where focus goes, energy flows. Kind of like a fun saying, where focus goes, energy flows. And that's where if our focus is at everything we're missing out on, right? I'm missing out on some of these foods. I'm missing out on the cookies. I'm missing out on these old foods I like. Guess what's going to happen? We're going to feel that. It's going to create an energy in the body. So if we're focusing on that, that's going to make a massive impact in your decisions in the moment, right? Because your physiology is actually going to change. So what we focus on grows. So we have control over what we focus on. And 2, we have control over what things mean. So the meaning we make of everything. And that's where going throughout this entire journey, especially as we get to that point of, all right, I'm in the informed pessimism and now I'm going into the valley of despair. This is where we get to choose the meaning. Is the meaning we're going to make, I'm being challenged. I'm being challenged to grow and to step into this healing that I say that I want for myself, that I'm being forced to have to up level to create the health, the wealth, the life that I want for myself. Or is the meaning, this is too hard, I can't do it, right? So we get to choose the meaning. And nothing in life really has meaning at all, except the meaning that you give it, right? How many of you guys have had something that you thought meant something in your life that all of a sudden the meaning shift and you're like, oh, right? Like for me, that was my gut issues. Actually, I was like, this was the word. I was like, this is the most awful thing that ever happened, but it became the best thing that ever happened to me because I wouldn't be who I am now because of what I had to learn, what I had to walk through, the discipline I got to develop along the way. And now I get to speak and I get to make an impact and I get to look back and say, you know what? That was the best thing that ever happened. And the meaning shifted for me. So in the moment when we can shift the meaning, that's where we get to step in again to that place of power. So what we focus on grows. Meaning, what is the meaning that we're making of it? Nothing in life has meaning except the meaning we give it. And the number 3 is our state, our physical body, our state. So our state is our posture, our breath, our pitch of voice. So very often when we make most of our impulsive decisions, especially around food, we're usually in some kind of a state. We're stressed out. It's a long day after work. We're tired and we're physically in a certain state where when we're in a different state, let's just say we just got done with the workout, we got a good night of sleep, we're feeling good, we're in a different state. We're like, I'm good. I don't need this. I got all this. I can crush it. So our physical state matters. So one of the best things we can do is 1, pay attention to our state because our states actually are patterns for triggers and habits and actions that we take. So a lot of the impulses, decisions we make, it's usually coming in a very, very certain state that we're in. So what does that mean? That means if we're noticing where our focus is going, we're noticing that we're being maybe negative about something, we're looking at it from a pessimistic standpoint, you know what's the best thing you can do? Go change your state, physically change your state, because our state follows emotional patterns based off of what we're in. I bet you if I put a screen that was like a lighting up a screen, kind of like a white sheet with people behind it where you could like kind of see their silhouettes, and I had a guy, you know, kind of hunched over there like this, I bet you could tell what his emotional state was just by his physical state, right? He'd be depressed, he'd be sad. You could have someone who's standing there like this in their state, and you know that they were, you know, somebody who is confident, you know, so we can change our physical state. That's something else we have control over. So the best thing, and you're noticing you're mad, you're upset, you're triggered, you're having those negative thoughts, go change your state. That's why I love exercising. Physically change your state. It doesn't always mean you got to go exercise. You can go for a walk. You can go get up, get out of your chair, go do something different. But notice when you're getting a lot of those food triggers of like, I want to do this, like physically change your state is one of the best things you can ever do for yourself. The other day, I was like feeling kind of low energy. And this is when I go a bit negative. I went outside my backyard and it was sunlight, and I started like doing some push-ups out there. And then I just kind of sat there in the sun, and I physically changed my state, and I came back in and I was like, why was that so bothering me? Right. So what we focus on, the meaning that we give everything, and then our physical state. And our state really is the filter to what we focus on and what we make things mean to us. And that's the power, and that's the control that we ultimately get to have. So part 2 to your guys' homework, along with going back to your definition, is I want you to also take a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle of the sheet of the paper, and on one side, write what I have control over. On the other side, write what I don't have control over. I want you guys to list out everything on this journey, what you have control over. So I've already kind of mentioned a couple of them, but there can be other things. I can have control over the food that I have in my house. I have control over what I choose to put into my body when I go out to eat at restaurants. I have control over, you know, my schedule, you know, so list out everything, like as many as you can of what you have control over. And then I want you to list out what you don't have control over, right? And what we don't have control over is I can control, you know, the food that I'm putting in my body, having all of that, following the plans and the protocols, but I can't control, you know, if I get an upset stomach. I don't have control over that. I can't control if I get a little bit bloated. So what's powerful about this is we know what we have control over. And then on the other side, we know what we get to release trying to have control over. And that was something that was super helpful for me on my own healing journey, because oftentimes anxiety comes from trying to control things that we don't have control over, right? You can ask yourself in the moment, what am I trying to control that I don't actually have control over? And typically it's something that we really actually can't control. So make a list of those things. Like we don't have control over the symptoms. We can control the controllables, which we are, but we're healing, and healing, there's the ing at the end. And that doesn't mean we do one thing and we're healed. So if we still have some symptoms, you know, as we're healing, we don't have control over that, right? So that's where we get to surrender into that, release any of those things as they come up. But then on the other side, we get to control what we do have control over. And that's what's empowering too, because sometimes we think we don't have control over these things, when we really actually do have control over these things. So those two things will be massively, massively powerful. So going back to the homework from last time, going over what you have control over, what you don't have control over, and we're going to continue to grow on this. So your homework between now and our next session is going to be this homework, along with diving into content number 2. It might be 2 or 3 in the portal. I'm going to say both for the recording, 2 or 3, but all about macros, protein. We're going to be diving into that. So we talked a lot about the gut healing protocol. You're going to be continuing that, but now we're going to talk about macros, because the food matters, what we put into our body, but also how much we eat matters, especially if we're trying to optimize our muscle mass. So we're going to switch gears, kind of focus a little bit more about that, get a bit more tactical. So you guys watch that video, come with questions here for next week. We're going to answer all of them, and I will see you then.